Well, welcome to this episode of Inside the OutHaus. We're back. We're happy and we're excited to have a bit of a showcase of the recent AEE International Conference that was held in Madison, Wisconsin, 1st to 4th November. We hopefully are going to get some other folks in here who attended the conference in person. But without any further ado, we do have Jeff Byerline from Virastar in the room, and he was at the conference. And so I think after we do a few housekeeping issues, we're going to perhaps get some insight into something about his experience at the conference and then what he presented about at that particular event. I'll just right now throw over to Cherie Mullen for an acknowledgement of country, and then we'll just get started.
Excellent. In the spirit of reconciliation, Inside the OutHaus acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today.
Thanks very much, Cherie. I just want to highlight a few things about this particular showcase and this particular conference. We are talking about the AEE International Conference, 2nd to the 5th, as I said. A conference that saw 625 attendees from 10 countries, 100 speakers and presenters, 80 workshops, and 30 volunteers. So quite a large conference, and we're very lucky to have some of the attendees and people here in the room tonight. Just before we get into hearing from Jeff and others, I would just like to give a bit of a plug for our ongoing relationship with AEE. Inside the OutHaus really has been involved with AEE for a bit of time, both as individuals. David and myself have attended conferences in person in the States, as has Cherie. And then when the global pandemic occurred, we really got involved in a long-term relationship with AEE via the Zoom room, and we have presented in their particular conferences and seminars and vice versa. I guess my goal with Inside the OutHaus in this form is to perhaps develop the presence of AEE a little bit more in Australasia and also in the Asia Pacific region, with the, I guess, added bonus of trying to promote people for perhaps attending next year's AEE International Conference, which is being held in Estes Park, Colorado. More about that in a moment. Without any further ado, I'm just going to throw over to Jeff, and he will potentially say a few words which will prompt us further. Thanks, Jeff.
Well, sure thing, Pete, and happy to be with you here again. I had a wonderful time at the recent AEE conference in Madison, Wisconsin, USA, just some days ago. It was the 51st annual conference, if I recall, and it was well attended with, as Pete mentioned, people showing up in person and virtually from a number of countries, a little over 600 participants, and it's a pretty small organization, about 2.5 employees, but it's been around for over 50 years and has done a whole lot of great work, both in North America and around the world, in supporting experiential education and particularly adventure education and outdoor education. I've been involved with AE for about 24 years as a board member and presenter and various types of volunteers and so on. And it's been a really great professional home for me as an outdoor and experiential educator. And I think it's a great community that's very welcoming, full of dedicated professionals from the classroom space, people that are trying to incorporate experiential methodology in traditional education, and that was a founding idea of AE, bringing outdoor education, active learning principles into traditional pedagogical environments. But it's also a great place to network with experiential and outdoor and adventure educators from around the world. As Pete noted, there is a conference happening next year in central USA in Estes Park, Colorado. And if you go to aee.org, you can see some information about the international conference. And also AE has a Asia Pacific group or chapter that has been having smaller regional conferences in the Asia Pacific region on and off for the past dozen or so years. There was one earlier this year in Singapore, and there's another one scheduled for fall of 2024 in India, which is not terribly close to Australia, but is another opportunity for folks to interface with experiential educators from around the region. So it's a wonderful, welcoming organization and a great place to network, whether you're joining virtually or in person. I represent Virastar. We had a booth in the exhibition hall. We had lots of folks stop by there. I gave a presentation on risk management plans and how to write risk management plans based in part off of some of the good work done by folks in Australia, thinking about outdoor program risk management with the Center for Human Factors and Socio-Technical Systems at the University of Queensland. Paul Salmon and Claire Dallett and a number of others are doing really, really good work on systems-based risk management in the outdoor and adventure sectors. So really encourage, and I think AE really encourages people from all around the world to get involved, and there's lots of different volunteer opportunities and virtual and some in-person opportunities as well. So I'll stop there and happy to hear any thoughts or questions. Pete, you're muted.
They're both muted.
Go ahead, Dom, if you want to say something. I've just worked out how to take mute off.
I did, Pete. It just really, Jeff, this is going to be a strange question, but what was the theme of the conference, or even the vibe of the conference? Like, what were the main topics of discussion, I guess, this year? Is there any particular theme that's come through this year that you haven't seen previously or at this conference?
I don't think there's not like an official theme, like a conference thread that really dominates every year. There are different themes and so on, but I think a lot of it for folks is still kind of post-COVID recovery, figuring out what the new landscape is like. And rebuilding. There's a lot of staffing issues with outdoor programs around the world, and so that's a consideration. There's some conversation about things like insurance, which I know is a big issue that outdoor programs are grappling with in Australia. I couldn't say there was one overarching theme, whether it was kind of curriculum or advocacy or accreditation or therapeutic use or any risk management or anything else in particular. It's really, there was a great diversity of practitioners that come together, a lot of higher ed folks and a number of K-12 folks, and then there's growing kind of therapeutic wilderness and wilderness therapy and adventure therapy section in AE. It's been around for decades, but it's been growing in terms of accreditation of programs and also certification of individual practitioners in the adventure therapy space. So that's a pretty exciting development, but I wouldn't say
Well, I
it
can't talk
dominated the
under this
conference,
meeting.
but it's certainly a thread that's part of the AEE conference every year.
Oh, thanks. What about climate change, climate action? Is that started to come in as far as people modifying programs? Because I know just recently, I'm not sure if you're aware of the Journal of Outdoor Education, or sorry, it's now the Joey. I keep getting it wrong because it changed its name. And there was a review recently about the number of articles that actually talked about climate change over the last however many years, and it seems to be a bit of a theme coming through in a few of our conferences, etc. at the moment.
It's certainly something that gets talked about, and in my sense, and I don't have, this is just anecdotal, I feel like in Australia it's maybe a little bit more intense than for practitioners in the USA, with fires in particular and also floods. I think it's multifaceted in the USA. People that are operating in the desert are having a harder time finding water sources. There's more heat issues, there's harmful algal blooms. Mountaineering programs are dealing with risks of glacier collapse and some other risks. Floods are a real issue. Unpredictable water levels for whitewater boating. And then there's also this kind of undercurrent of like anxiety and stress around climate and that piece. I wouldn't say it's a dominant concern. I think other countries, and AE is kind of USA dominant in terms of a lot of where the people come from. I would say there are other countries that are putting a little bit more energy and thought around climate change than the USA is, but it's certainly something that at Veerstar we talk with our training participants about how to adapt to changing climate in terms of a variety of risks, and it does come up in the AE conference from time to time.
Yeah. It's interesting for me, I think, because it's something that outdoor people are good at modifying their programming. They do dynamic risk assessment, but at the same time, we also have to think about what's the long-term solutions here, as far as not just keep modifying things so that we end up with a smaller and smaller window when we can run our programs, etc. So it's about educating the future generations on it, but also making sure we can deliver positive and genuine, quality experiences right now as well. Yeah.
Right.
Can I just throw into the chat? I think that it's a very valid argument, I think, for perhaps doing the online or the hybrid part of conferencing really well, because I think there's a very good argument for that particular model, not having people travel long distances on aircraft, but actually being able to do it from the space of their office. And if we could actually, I think, develop that, I think it's a win-win for lots of people. And I'm not saying that the face-to-face experience is not incredibly valuable, and I'm not saying that the hybrid experience replaces it, but I'm just saying that I think if we did that side of things a bit more professionally, then I think we would be able to involve more of our wider experiential community in professional events.
I went to an event. It wasn't an outdoor education as such. It was a workforce of the sport, recreation, fitness industries in Australia, and it was about regional and remote workforces. So they held it in Alice Springs, so smack bang in the middle of Australia. And so I had, so that's about, I think, 3,000 kilometers from my home. I had 2 flights to get there on the Wednesday, all day forum on the Thursday, and 2 flights to get home on Friday. And that's a lot of carbon going out there, and a lot of time as well. And I completely agree with you, Pete. But it was about a regional and remote topic, so they wanted to hold it somewhere that is sort of remote, so they were walking the walk. But I had the same thought, to be honest.
And I think that the quality connection you had with the human beings at that event probably can't be replaced with the hybrid model.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying that I think it's a value add to that quality connection that you had in Alice Springs with those people.
Yep.
I agree, and I think there's room for both. You know, there's a lot of us did a whole lot of remote stuff for the last few years, and I think we recognize that it worked. And I also know that when I started going back to conferences the last 12 months in person, one, like Dom said, it was a whole lot more expensive and time consuming and uncomfortable sitting on airplanes for a long time. But that, you know, we're built for human connection, and a lot of these conferences, especially if you're going for a few years, it's seeing friends, it's networking, it's having lunch or serendipitous meeting people and that sort of thing. And that's really valuable. But I also think for people that are wanting the information, you can transmit information remotely almost as well as you can in person. And as we keep thinking about ways to be climate friendly, I think there is definitely a really, really important space for online connections, conferences, trainings, and the like.
But I think with that in mind, I think, and I'm the guilty party sitting in the room, we all need to be really aware of how the technological platforms work that we are using in a hybrid model, so that we can actually deliver a seamless, amazing professional experience with amazing audio and amazing visuals and all of those things. Because I think if you start compromising on that, then it sort of becomes quite average for everyone in the virtual space.
And I think you have to look at
sorry, Jeff. Yeah.
One of the issues that comes up is if you're doing something at 11 a.m. in Wisconsin, USA, it's going to be 3 a.m. somewhere, and that's hard. I mean, you can do recordings and people can watch it later, but that's even one step removed if it's all kind of asynchronous and you can't interact with folks. It's also hard, you know, I gave a presentation on risk management plans and there was no cameras in the room. It was completely an in-person experience at the conference. So a lot of the, and the AEE is very small and they can't set up video cameras and all that in every single breakout room. So I don't know how they figured out what would be transmitted live and not, but I think for conferences in the kind of outdoor adventure experiential space, there's a lot of kind of logistical and cost considerations that have to be dealt with.
If I might put some 2 cents in, I'm gonna be real honest. I haven't watched any of the stuff from the AEE and conference, and that's mostly because I am a mom of a 2-year-old. And so getting up at 2 a.m. in the morning for a couple hours was not exactly ideal for me. So I'm looking forward to when the videos do come out and I will be able to access and see what was available. So maybe that's even a consideration, especially if we're engaging international conferences where time is of the essence for some people, especially people with kids and stuff like that. Then maybe that's something that could be a consideration, is if it's possible to get any of it out quicker so that they have a quicker access to it. And also maybe even the idea of if you're trying to engage an international audience within a certain time zone, then can you then schedule something that falls within other time zones that works a little bit better for them? So even if it's like a meet and greet or something like that, because if we want that connection piece of it, because we can watch the videos, then if you do a meet and greet out, you know, that falls within, you know, Australia Pacific time, then, you know, that would kind of help connect, I think, people from a different area and from over here to make them want to be more engaged.
Great points, Cherie. Thanks.
Hello, David. You must have an opinion on this, surely.
Good afternoon, everyone. I was late. Apologies all around. Yeah, out working the good work, doing orienteering with some year 11s. So just wrapping up the winners and the losers and who gets all the lollies. What was the question posed? Sorry, I sort of jumped in halfway through.
Well, I guess Dom posed a question initially around climate change and whether you know, people at particular professional development events are having conversations around climate change. And I am paraphrasing what Dom said, so I may get it wrong, but and whether, you know, this is sort of an issue. And Jeff, as the representative who'd been at the conference, sort of responded from his perspective of what happened at the AEE International Conference. And then we went into a bit of a discussion about the advantages of having a hybrid or online element in conference events, particularly as a sort of strategy of dealing with some climate change because people aren't traveling, etc. And then that's where the discussion is sort of now.
That's where. So I think, yeah, for me, I guess it's always, every issue is a local issue, I guess, whether it's in the outdoor industry or whatever it might be. For me, I really wanted to go this year because it was, you know, the 51st, and we didn't get there last year. But it was an opportunity that I couldn't afford this year because of being a freelancer and having to take work over attending the conference. And the hybrid model definitely gives you the ability to interact and to engage with, I guess, the atmosphere to a certain extent and some of the content. But it's a model, I think, that's going to take a long time, more than just the one-off event that was COVID, even though it's still with us in various forms. It'll take a long time for, I think, events, especially experiential education events, to change or to fully embrace that model. Whilst AEE did it really well in 2020, 21, and then partially last year. I think it's really hard to do it on the ground really well with, again, limited budgets and limited engagement, I guess, by the presenters if they're having to, you know, focus on a camera like I'm doing now, but also look to the 5 or 6 people in the breakout room and engage with them, and then having the audio issues of questions being asked and all that type of stuff. So I think it's a really big challenge for our sector, I think, and I think it's really something that we should embrace as a sector or as an industry. That you know, walking the talk of not getting on a jet plane and flying for 14 hours outside of the cost, but the environmental cost of doing that has to be worth it if there is a it's not cost prohibitive, but there is an option to you know, present that content, whatever form that might take and whatever quality that might be, to a wider audience, so that we're not all working in silos. So I feel, especially as a freelancer, I work as a solo operator. I'm out there with 28 year 11s this afternoon by myself, and I'm running this activity, I'm running that activity, and I ran a classic activity this afternoon and processing it as I was doing it, going, this is actually not appropriate for me right now in the current context. It was a game called Tank Commander, which is a fun game. You throw you know, missiles at each other and you make them wet. And I was going, this is the wrong thing to be doing right now because of what's happening globally. And the teachers were giving me sort of hard looks, but we played the game and it was okay, and the kids enjoyed it. But it was a case of, yeah, I was too much in my silo a little bit this afternoon, not thinking outside of what's going on in the wider world. And I think conferencing and any sort of networking event can really help us to expand our horizons and to see a bigger picture, whether it's AEE or AOR or OEAQ going to far north Queensland and having an event up there, but also presenting it down here. It's one of those. I'm passionate about it. You can tell. I really want everyone to be doing conferencing and to be doing it through a hybrid format, so it lowers the cost of entry. We get more people who are, you know, in isolated locations. Where I work, these folks up here, they don't get any professional development. I'm up in Yeppoon, so I'm about 70 minutes north of Brisbane this week, working as a freelancer for some programming. at a center, and they don't have that interaction of a network of other people locally that they know or that they connect to often enough because of the tyranny of distance and because of the cost of it. So I think we should be doing it more, and we should really be supporting, but also almost, yeah, definitely supporting our organizations to really develop that content and to develop that engagement in such a way that it's cost effective for them, but also cost effective for the facilitator or the instructor or the middle manager who doesn't have a big budget but who wants to participate at some level and to have a connection, and not making it cost prohibitive just because you feel you can. And having content that's readily accessible really quickly, whether it's video content or audio, online tutorials or PowerPoints or anything that was handed out to the physical people who are there. Sorry, that's my 10 cents. I've waffled on as I usually do in the OutHaus.
There is another person in the room. I have met you before, but I don't remember where. I think it was in a Zoom meeting somewhere. Would you, either in the chat or just over the mic, could you introduce yourself and perhaps?
Yeah, hi. So I'm Madhvi, and I'm from India. We've met a little bit, Paul, on the I'm on the Leadership Council for the APAC region for AEE.
Yep.
And actually the conversation that we are having right now is interesting for me because India is hosting the conference next year. And it would be good to know how we can enable the hybrid version of the conference for everyone in the region. And, what else does the region require in terms of sharing resources, meeting spaces? And I actually came across this and I realized, okay, wow, we have a forum which actually gets people together from the Asia Pacific region. So I thought I would join in and see how we could take some of these conversations forward.
It's fantastic to have you in the OutHaus again, and welcome.
Thank you.
Mojave, I was at the APAC regional conference in Singapore earlier this year, and it was just a fantastic experience and a great opportunity for folks from Australia and India and lots of other countries to meet and collaborate. And I know there's a lot of excitement about having another conference in India in 2024, and these things are a lot of work to organize and 1,000 little details, but they do offer a remarkable opportunity for people to network and share good ideas, and also just kind of have a sense of community, and I'm not alone. There are other people that are grappling with the same issues of training and retention and insurance and curriculum and credibility and funding and interfacing with K-20 education norms and regimes and all those other things. So there's I think it's wonderful that there'll be a conference in India in about a year from now, and I'm just very excited for it.
I hope to see all of you all there.
We'd love to be there. What part of India is it in, and when are we when have the dates been set, Mojave?
So we are looking at sometime close to October, mid-October, because before that it's either monsoon or it's very hot. And it's probably going to be around Mumbai, which is a city called Pune. And it's a great place because the weather's good and it has the whole Sayadri, so it has scope for trekking and camping and so on and so forth. So we're hoping to get a little bit of that in as well. And of course, if you're adventurous enough, then the Himalayas. So I think there's a lot to do here.
It's a very, very beautiful part of the world.
Yeah.
And there's been some interesting work in that area in Pune, in Maharashtra, around regulations around adventure tourism, and I know a lot of the outdoor and adventure education community and outdoor recreation communities have been involved in that for a number of years with the state government. So I think it would be interesting for folks to come and experience firsthand and talk to people firsthand about, now that regulation or that government resolution has been out for a couple years, what's worked well and what's not worked well. I know Dom is aware that there are moves and thoughts and is involved in this to look at accreditation schemes and that sort of thing to standardize and support quality and safety of outdoor and adventure programs in Australia. So I think it'll be a neat conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that accreditation piece, and it's tending towards now organizational accreditation more than individual accreditation. But I think there's a place for both. It depends what works in our systems. But there's certainly some work to be done in that space as far as the accreditation, and that goes beyond the outdoor education, experiential education space. It's definitely in the adventure tourism space, the adventure therapy space, and even into the general outdoor recreation space as well. So there is a lot of work to be done in that space that I think they're all a little bit different, but they also have a pretty quite coherent shared values across those different types of organizations. I think there is a role for all of us to play in that.
Right. And AE has been working on this, as I imagine many folks know, has had an experiential adventure accreditation program for organizations for some decades now, and more recently one around adventure therapy. And I think the thought is that if you can get an organization accredited, then that's going to support good policies and procedures, and it's a little bit more systematic than focusing on individual practitioners and making sure they have the skills. And so I think that the conversations around organizational accreditation in Australia is a really good thing.
I think it's definitely something who everyone who works in the outdoor sector has to deal with at whatever level they are working at, whether they're working as an instructor or working in management or working in all facets of the sector. So I think it's a very relevant conversation, and I think it's an area of the outdoor education world particularly that can always be improved, and we need to be always shall we say, being reflective and trying to improve on our best practice.
Dev, can I ask, did you go to the AOL conference in November as well, or late October, and I know you're at the AEE?
Yeah, they're the same time this year, so I wasn't able to go to the AOR conference. They had a joint conference with a athletic sporting body, and so they weren't able to have a different date than AEE this year.
Yeah, so I saw that, and I know AEE, AEE, and AOR have in the past, maybe before the pandemic, had a dual conference together, and so they combined resources, because a lot of the same audience for both of those conference events are the same sort of people. They're university people, they're researchers, they're lecturers, they're students, and then they're practitioners. Do you think there's value in, from a organizational North American sort of peak body sort of focus to bring those conference bodies closer together in their dates, or to separate them out? And do you know, and I was just wondering if you had an opinion on that, and because I know you're connected with probably both organizations equally.
I think it's a good thing. Both of the organizations are pretty small, and the conferences are relatively small, anywhere from 300 to 700 participants, depending on the year. And obviously COVID has changed a whole lot of things. And so in 2019, the two organizations had a joint conference, and each of the organization is kind of always experimenting with different other associations. There are a number of experiential education associations that have talked about coming together, and then there's you can get farther and farther away in terms of outdoor recreation and then sports and all these different sorts of things, and then there's therapeutic programs and the like. So I think it's a good thing, but I think there's also some concerns about, well, is one bigger than the other, and are they going to poach our members? And because nobody's making a ton of money here, and so everyone's a little concerned about, like, we're on the edge financially, and if we partner, are we going to get swallowed up, or that kind of thing. But at the same time, everybody gets along, we're all in it for the same mission. So I'd say it's a little complicated, but AE has partnered with other organizations in the past. AOR has as well. This year in Estes Park, there's AE will be partnering with another organization. The LGBTQ Outdoor Summit will be happening at the same place and the same time, and that's a fairly small entity that has only been around for maybe 5-6 years or something like that. But I think that's going to be a neat collaboration and gonna be a useful thing.
Okay, that's interesting. Again, details, I guess, from the conference that I guess some of us weren't aware of. What would be your pitch to get more Australians or more people from Southeast Asia to the States, and let's say for next year, 2024 in Colorado? And let's focus, I guess, just on AEE. As a cost, $3,000 for us to get flights or thereabouts, plus accommodation, plus having a good time and enjoying ourselves. What would be the great pitch? And I'm looking at Dom laughing at me, going, I'm looking at Dom going, hey Dom, we need to find a way to get more people from Australia, or even just from Queensland, to these events, so that when we have a national conference in Australia, half of the group is Queenslanders. We're very passionate about networking and meeting people and having a social drink and a catch up. And I don't see why we shouldn't be doing it on a global sense. And I'd love to know, also from an APEC perspective, how do we get people to go to India next year? But that's a second question.
Well, I think it's a great thing. I think that international collaboration is a really useful thing, and there may be the odd professor who can get some kind of funding from their university to come over and give a presentation. I know the state level sport ministries or departments have been supportive of adventure activity standards development over the years in Australia. So maybe if they're able to keep opening their wallets and create some kind of bursary to send people to these conferences, I think it could be a good thing. The Australian adventure activity standards are a global role model. We work with clients at Verstar from all around the world, and I'm always sending them to look at the Australian adventure activity standards and say, look at these are really great. And we've pushed them in South Africa, which is working on adventure standards, and in Eastern Europe, where we've been doing some work, and lots of places as really great role models. Singapore is looking at them as well. And there are similar efforts that are happening through AEE and others in the USA. And so it's great to get people connected and talking about, well, what's working for you and what's not working for you, and all those sorts of things. I think it comes down to kind of funding and social priorities and the like. And in New Zealand, outdoor adventure is a huge part of the economy and the culture and so on. I think Australia's economy is a little more diversified, and there's a little bit less kind of social national priority on it, but it's also a real leader, a thought leader, and in other ways a leader. So to the extent that people can scrape together funding for those things from whatever sources, I think it's a really good thing. And vice versa. Like, it's great when people from outside Australia come to the NOEC or some of the state level conferences and learn from what's going on in Australia.
Dom, from a peak body perspective in Queensland, what's available for a Queensland outdoor educator to be able to find their way to a conference like this?
Yeah, there's not a lot really, Dave. It's really hard as far as funding for like financial support to get to these sort of conferences. It's really hard to find it. I think it's like we struggle internally. Our government funding, it'll specifically say no international travel in some of our stuff. They actually put restraints on it because they say, no, we want you to use it for, work in here, and they try to, they don't want to be seen to be paying for me to go gallivanting across the globe. And actually that trip I did last week or the week before to Alice Springs, that was fully paid for by the organization. I didn't even pay for that, and which was one of the contributing factors of me going for a thing which was 4 flights. That was paid for. But yeah, it's really hard, I think, to get the external funding for those sort of things. Really pleased to hear what Jeff just said about the Adventure Activity Standard. We are actually right now chasing government funding to review that as well from the Outdoor Council of Australia, because it's coming up on next year. It'll be 5 years since we released it. So we always had said we'd review it every 5 years at a minimum. So we're looking at a review of that to make sure it stays current as well. But yeah, it's really pleasing to hear that it is considered that highly, and it's a lot of work went into it, and we need to make sure we don't lose that. But it does need an update. Like, one of the things it doesn't have the word pandemic in it, which I think we've all learned something in the last few years that it probably should be in there. So that's one of the things we need to do in the update. And there's also a few different activities who've approached us about, can you do a good practice guide for this activity, which is always challenging to include more in there, but it's about what we can resource. Yeah, I'm not sure, Dave, honestly, to answer your question. I don't have a lot of answers to that one.
So I'll ask the last question and then I'll pivot back.
Hey, Dave, sorry. Can I intervene for a second? It sounds like to me, it sounds like since we're the experts, sounds like since the Australians, actually I'm Australian now, we're the experts as Australians, then it sounds like we should be, we should be presenting at these conferences. And maybe that's a way to kind of cut down on the cost, is maybe you look at a presenting opportunity, being an expert in your field, and you could go to India as an expert.
What a great suggestion, Cherie. I would like to, before the session actually ends at 13 minutes past, I would just like to ask Mojave a question. Moving forward to Asia Pacific 2024 in India, what support would you need from the wider community, and how can we, as inside the OutHaus, perhaps get the word out and help you putting that conference on?
So a couple of things is, if we can spread the word within the Asia Pacific community, so that we have a more vibrant group of presenters from the region. I think it'll be valuable for everyone to learn from each other, because it's pretty much been America-centric. And I think there's a very vibrant practice in the Asia Pacific region, which we really need to bring forward, because that's how the community will learn and gain from each other, which is one piece. So, amplifying it as much as possible. If there's any support that we can get in terms of what we spoke of, taking parts of it hybrid, because there are costs of, creating that material, recording it, editing it, and so on and so forth. And I think that would be a great way to build resources for people who can't travel, but still have access to the learning. So being able to create a learning resource bank or something like that, which comes out of the Asia Pacific region. And of course, any support that we can get in terms of sponsorships and so on and so forth for the conference itself, in which case then we pass on the benefits of the participation fees to the people who want to come. because it's expensive to travel, and then you add the cost of staying and you add the cost of the conference itself, it becomes a larger number. So we are in conversation with AE itself as to how they can support us, at least for the first couple of years, in sponsoring a conference in the Asia Pacific region, and as well as, removing, have some kind of differential pricing or equitable pricing for regions from the Asia Pacific who may not be able to afford a fee to go all the way. Or so how do we, have little bit more conversations around that? Things like that would be really helpful. And of course, encouraging more and more people to come and present, because then, we have a lot more voices and it becomes a vibrant Asia Pacific community. We don't necessarily need to travel all the way to the US to, create that same experience and the same learning.
And I totally concur. Like, and in this statement, I'm not in any way detracting from the AE International Conference, but I think that the Asia Pacific community is a very unique area, and the way we actually present outdoor ed and experiential ed is quite unique to our region and the cultures and the people who live in that region and work in that region. And so I think the conference on many levels, an Asia Pacific Regional Conference, will have a very unique flavor, which is not going to be like any other regional conference. And I think that's an amazing selling point for both the conference and AEE moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've potentially decided that I will, Mojave, I will send you an email and I will discuss a few ideas that I have around
that'll be wonderful.
Partnering up.
Yes, thank you. That'll be wonderful.
And we can definitely, through our channels from Outdoors Queensland and the Outdoor Council Australia, definitely put some promotions out there about the conference, particularly when you're looking for speakers. If you can get that to us as soon as that's announced, be more than happy to push that out, and then we can push, the attendance at the conference as well. But yeah, if you're looking for that sort of thing, yeah, be more than happy to do that. Like, I've only heard positive things from the one in Singapore. Jamie Bennett from Western Australia, he told me great things about it. He said it was terrific. So it's really good to see it happening.
I was at a conference in June, was it? Or fairly recently in Spain, the International Camping Foundation, and there are a couple folks from Australia there as well who are involved in the AAAS and the very original development of that, and had some great conversations with them, and that representation and their ability to share decades of history of thinking about camp and outdoor and adventure activities in Australia was really valuable. So Dom, I can make sure that you get the call for proposals for the international conference, and Mojave, you may be able to share what's going on with the APAC regional conference. And I think, and maybe there's some kind of tie-in with NOEC or some of the state level conferences as well, either with the APAC regional some year or with the AE international conference at some year, because there's so much good work going on in Australia with this, so much good thought leadership and advancement of the industry. I think it makes a lot of sense for there to be growing connections.
Yeah, that sounds great. I was just talking to a couple of people who were at that Spanish conference as well. They had a great time there too, and said it was really really valuable.
Yep. Yeah, it was fantastic.
Dave, earlier we cut you off. You had a question that you wanted to ask.
It was just probably pivoting back to local conferences, and you might have already covered it, Dom. So if that's the case, what's on the horizon in the next 12 to 18 months, locally in Queensland and also at the national level? If you've got a summary of that to hand, that'd be great as well.
Yeah, NOEC will be in Victoria next year, the National Outdoor Education Conference in. Andrew Knight will shoot me if he watches this recording now, because I can't remember whereabouts in Victoria it's going to be held. I think it's in the first week of December next year. Outdoors Queensland, funnily enough, I've actually been thinking of running a purely online conference. And it's funny because earlier in this we were talking about, and I was looking at that as well. I'm not sure if we're going to get that done next year, but I'm still thinking it might be possible. It's just a matter of when we time it. But I was looking at it as a purely online delivery aspect. Haven't got much further than that at the moment. We're about to do a bit of a focus group survey or asking people about what they'd like to see from us, and that's one of the things I'm thinking on that. But I was thinking of it as purely an online one from an Outdoors Queensland point of view, just as something a little bit different, even though we're not, touch wood, going, with the COVID stuff behind us, doesn't mean we shouldn't take advantage of some of the technological advantages that we might have had, but we'd have to do it well. And that's the big challenge. If we're going to present it as a conference, we need to use a good platform. We need to, without trying to replicate those interpersonal random opportunities to run into each other and have conversations outside of the conference itself, we'd have to do it well. So that's the piece that I'm sort of trying to grapple with at the moment on how we might do that. So you heard it here first. I haven't even talked about that publicly yet. So
but potentially, Dom, that could be the niche for Queensland. Yeah, there's the national conference, which is the big face-to-face and gets shared around. New South Wales have their biannual one now that they're trying to have in sort of the middle of the year, which is in a good time zone for between school semesters. And so where does Queensland or where did the other states sort of fit in to have their conferences that don't impact in the same way, even within Australia, because there's still the cost of traveling, the cost of accommodation, the cost of attending the conference. I would have loved to have gone to the Australian Camping Association's conference in Adelaide this year.
Yep.
Not directly in my field, but I'm working at a camp this week as a facilitator, and it was just out of my reach. It was just too cost prohibitive for 2.5 days of conferencing for what they were going to offer me in terms of what I'd get out of it as a freelancer. And so the virtual solution could be Queensland's niche. And I think Pete will probably jump in here. We'd love to help you host or help you co-host that in some way, and however we can support you guys.
There could be a role there for an OutHaus for sure.
I just flicked the dates for the National Outdoor Education Conference 2024, 4th to the 6th of December at the Federation University Gippsland campus, which apparently, according to the Outdoor Education Australia website, is less than 2 hours southeast of Melbourne. So a short run in a hire car. Or you could take public transport and save the planet.
Or an 18-hour road trip, whichever comes first.
Well, it's a goal of mine to get to that the NOEC conference someday, virtually or in person at some point. And from the perspective of AEE, it's wonderful to have representation from the Australian adventure and outdoor community, and I hope we all can continue to find ways to expand and sustain that.
Yes, well, I'd just like to say, Jeff, thanks so much for coming inside and giving of your time this evening in your time zone and sharing a bit about Veristar and also your wisdom around AEE 2023. It's been most insightful.
My pleasure.
And Don Courtney, it's been great to catch up with you on the Zoom. I feel like we haven't Zoomed very much this year, and I've quite missed you actually.
It's nice to be this, Pete. Thank you, mate. Yeah.